Assalamu alaikum, dear students. In our current session, we would focus on the conscious efforts that were made during the Renaissance period for the development of English language. I hope and expect that by the end of this session, you would be able to understand what were the conscious efforts that were made and what was the impact of those efforts on the development of language during the Renaissance period. Well, my dear students, if we just go slightly back in the history of English language from this Renaissance period, we would understand just a century or two back, just 1 or 2 centuries before this Renaissance period, the upper class was more interested in, French language or Latin language. They would be interested in, learning these languages, perfecting themselves in the correct pronunciation of French language. They would be interested in sending their children to, learn these language French or, sometimes Latin as well. So, the interest of the upper class was mainly in French language and then to some extent in Latin language. Now, in the Renaissance period, that is the time of, change, of discovery, of innovation, of advancement in technology, now with the advancements in printing, now with, the means of communication that were available, situation completely changed. And also because all of these, changes in the times, there was a change in the socio-cultural setup. Now, for the first time, masses gathered significance in the society. And because English was the language of masses, now they were in the position that was strong. Of course, English was considered worthy of cultivation at this time point. For the first time during the Renaissance period, it happened so that people would be interested in the education of their children in English language. They would like them to learn English language and to be perfect in that. Eliot urged that noblemen's sons should be brought up by those, and I quote what he says. He says, the noblemen should get their children, get educated and be brought up by those who speak none English but that which is clean, polite, perfectly and accurately pronounced. So he set 4 criteria, 1, clean, 2, polite, 3, that it is perfect, and 4, that it is accurate. And he says, omitting no letter or syllable. So, the requirement is what? Perfect pronunciation. This is for the first time, in fact, in the history of English language that such an importance is attached to English language. He further observes that he knew some children of noble birth who had attained, what he says, corrupt and foul pronunciation. So, if you go back in the history during the Middle Ages times, as, the pronunciation of French language was a mark or was a kind of a sign of being educated or being learned or being sophisticated. Now the focus was on English for the first time, and attaining, perfection in pronunciation was considered to be important. Equally, it was considered bad if somebody would not have what we call the right pronunciation. When the desire to improve, it was inculcated in the people, it exhibited it in so many different times. Particularly, it was exhibited through the desire to, to enlarge the fund of vocabulary that English language had. And the second important aspect was to regulate its spellings. Over the times, if you go back again in the history, you would realize in the Middle Ages times and also in the Old Ages times for that matter, English was, never standardized for spellings. In the Middle English times, the scribes would, use the sounds, the pronunciation to, to use as a key to give spellings to words. So, there was no standardization. Everybody would write the way they would like it. This was for the first time that conscious efforts were made to standardize vocabulary as well as, spellings. Also, my dear students, this was a time when there was a desire, there was an interest to improve it, in some other ways. Efforts were made, clearly, towards, developing a kind of attitude towards English, where people would take it as something, serious, and would make conscious efforts to, give fruitful considerations so that it could really be developed as a strong language. Overall, what I would say is this is the period in which we attain something as a standard or as something, recognizably, modern English for the first time. And in fact, if we again go back in the history, all the roots of this modern English that we have, we find it closely connected with the English of these times.